Hello and good morning, everybody. I'm Jackie McGuire. I am the co-host of Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm also practice lead and principal analyst for security at the Cube Research. Welcome to this webcast today, which is sponsored by Bitdefender. I have Dan Darabon today with me, who is the Senior Director of Product Management at Bitdefender. We're going to talk about why most security needs are really unique, but it seems to me and Dan like most security solutions are pretty one size fits all. Dan, thank you for joining us today. Really happy to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me, Jackie. It's going to be fun, hopefully, and
Yeah.
very also informative for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually a topic that I complain about quite a bit. This whole kind of concept that out of the box security solutions are going to fit every enterprise out there. So I guess let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, how long you've been at Bitdefender, and what your background is.
Yeah, so I've been with Bitdefender. Actually, I just turned 7 years and 2 months now since I joined Bitdefender. Before joining Bitdefender, I spent 7 years at HP doing various roles. But I started my career as a jack of all trades, doing everything from programming, scripting, product management, support, everything that could be done in a small startup. And then I joined the corporate side of HP. As I mentioned, I spent a couple of years there, and then I finally got into cybersecurity, joining Bitdefender, and I can tell you that it has been a blast.
I feel like tech years are like dog years. So you've got a good like century of experience under your belt at this point. I was like 7 years. Wow, that's a really long time at a tech company.
You can see that my beard as well is starting to change color. So, but
Yeah,
this is
the
what
pink
happens.
and
I heard to
purple.
everybody that is in cybersecurity, right? So,
Yeah, I think everybody thinks the pink and purple is just because I'm a punk, but it's more because I'm solidly like 60% gray at this point. Awesome. So Bitdefender's actually been around since 2001. So in addition to you having a century of experience, Bitdefender's also been around since before almost everybody in the world had a computer in their house. So I imagine that gives great perspective in terms of how security has evolved. So tell us a little bit about Bitdefender and kind of what you're doing now and how the company's evolved.
so Bitdefender, just like you mentioned, started back in 2001. One of the key aspects about Bitdefender is that in those 25 years since we started, we continuously innovated. And that is a key differentiator for us. We focused a lot on technology, and that is one of the main reasons why there are multiple other technology companies that are using our technology as well. But we all focus a lot on defending from the bad guys and protecting both individuals as well as organizations. Now, this is, I would say, a key aspect for us because we have this very aggressive prevention mindset. The more things that we can prevent from happening, the safer we can keep an organization. And I'll be honest, for a lot of years, the security conversation has revolved around detection and response. And I agree, these continue to be critical capabilities. However, I think we have come like a full circle and we are back into the prevention part, trying to understand what the attackers can leverage before they actually leverage it. And this is because the entire threat landscape has changed dramatically. We are seeing attackers moving faster, they're interactive, they are using automation. And what happens is that they start to use trusted tools against you, like operating system tooling and infrastructure management and automation tooling. And they are getting smarter at hiding in places where most security tools don't look. We have this Bitdefender cybersecurity assessment report, something that we publish every year. And I saw two very interesting things there. One was the fact that, let me remember the exact number. I think it was 67% of respondents that believe there's a strong need to reduce the attack surface by disabling this unnecessary tooling and application. And the second thing is that more than a third of those respondents actually reported ongoing difficulties in preventing the misuse of these legitimate tools.
Yeah.
And
It's the peril
that's
of the cloud, right? It's like it
exactly.
takes 10 seconds to spin everything up, but it takes 10 seconds to spin things up. And it's one of the really interesting things is that a lot of times the data that's breached from companies is data they didn't even know they had. Much less did they know it was unsecure. They didn't even know someone was collecting it somewhere. And that's I think we all have that, right? It's almost like
Yep.
being in your house and being like, man, we really should lock these doors and windows, but I have windows I don't even know about. I have back doors in my house that I don't even know about. Like we can't lock the dog door because then the executive can't crawl in after hours when they want to. And
Exactly,
it's usually
exactly.
that, right? It's usually some management interface that some high level managers like, why the can't I get to this thing at 8 o'clock on a Sunday? So somebody just opens it up and then forgets to close it.
Absolutely. And it's exactly that. People have all kinds of privileges and accesses to things that they either don't use or they're super, super rarely use. And that gives attackers a very nice way to get into your organization. And well, as we know, attackers, they are after the pot of gold.
Yeah, I mean, I know for myself, and I'm neurospicy, right? I'm pretty autistic, I'm pretty ADHD, as are a lot of people in security. And I know for myself, it's not necessarily that I have bad intentions. Like when I was a data scientist, right? It's just that I was hyper focused on getting what I wanted to do done. And all of the security stuff, if it's not easy, it becomes kind of secondary. And I don't think people ever have bad intentions. It's just that our tech stacks have become so complex, even for some of the smallest businesses. And that's one of the things I think is interesting is Bitdefender, a lot of security companies don't want to wade into the small and mid-sized business, because they have more problems, they have fewer resources. And so you guys are helping there as well, which I think is even more complicated, right? Because you maybe have like one person that is dealing with security when they're not building software. And so I think just a resourcing issue for a lot of companies. How do you guys help with that?
It is exactly like that. So a lot of the mid-sized companies and smaller companies are struggling with resources. And ever since we started with Gravity Zone, which is our platform, we focused a lot on ease of use. Why? Just because of the reason you mentioned. There's one person or two persons that have to deal with security. And if I need to go and review 10,000 alerts per day, first of all, clearly impossible. Second of all, if somebody claims this, don't give them a raise. It's just not true. But the reality is that if you need to deal with security and you have other things as well, you need to focus. When you deal with security, context needs to be there for you. And that context needs to be brought in automatically. It needs to be correlated as well. Because again, if I spend 1 hour looking at an incident and I have 9,999 waiting for me, that's
It's roughly
clearly
100 years
something.
worth of work.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
that's job security, right?
Assuming no other alerts come in, that's roughly 100 years worth of work.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
so I think so when we talk about one size fits all security. I guess let's be specific. How do you see that happening in organizations? Is it just that? Is it just, we set up a SIM, but we didn't really put any effort into, correlating all of the data that comes in? So we're trying to make it work, but we're just inundated with alerts. How does that manifest? What else do you see from customers when you initially get there?
I think we can even go to level down and just look at the policies. I mean, every security tool is managed to security policies, whatever the name of those security policies is. The reality is that managing, if you have, let's say, 500 employees, managing 500 security policies for each employee, you have a security policy. Again, absolutely crazy. Nobody's going to do this. Doesn't exist. The reality, and the unfortunate reality is that they end up with one or two or three policies that apply to the entire organization. And this was one of the reasons why I would say we challenged ourselves to do better. And we started to look at, to ask ourselves various questions. Now, what if we stop thinking about detecting attackers as early as possible? And what if we stop giving them room to move around in the first place? And this is the simple and fundamental premise that actually led us to build something that's new, something that's designed not just to react to threats, but to reduce the likelihood of that threat to actually exist. And we this is something that I'm very proud here at Bitdefender. We validate this concept over many conversations with hundreds of customers, numerous value-added partners, MSSPs, CISOs, security strategists, industry analysts, cybersecurity professionals. And we heard them saying, yes, we need more control over the attack surface. We need it in a way that doesn't create more work or more noise.
Yeah.
And they told us they need intelligent security
Mm.
that's personalized to their operating system. So again, they have fewer things to worry about,
Yeah.
right?
And I go back to my ADHD, right? So one of the most difficult things in responding to an incident. And just to be clear, I'm a data scientist, so I have not ever actually been a tier 1 or 2 SOC analyst, but people call me because they know I know security, right? So I've actually sat in a handful of incident responses, and context switching is a nightmare. So if you're in the middle of investigation, and the statistic I used to quote all the time when I was at Cribble was the average SOC analyst needs to know 6 query languages just to do an investigation. So, everything from being able to go into Kibana, being able to go into like all of your different analytics platforms. And I'm on the trail of something, but I switch to the wrong window or use the wrong query language, or it's just so disruptive. So when I was looking at Gravity Zone, one of the things that really appealed to me is it takes all of that context, right? And it reduces the number of screens you have to shift through by kind of automatically drawing these lines for you. Because again, best of intentions, super autistic, so my pattern matching is top notch, but also ADHD. So if I have to switch through too many screens, I might lose that pattern, right? And so,
Yeah.
and this is, I think that and I've accepted that I'm 10x in some areas. Getting my laundry put away is not one of them, but your most impactful technical people, they all have this problem, and that like a dog with a bone, but if you make them run through too many doors, they might drop it, right? So can you talk a little bit more about that, about Gravity Zone, and how it correlates that information? And let's go with, do you have an example of like a typical investigation and how that would look?
Yeah, so I can talk a bit about that from
Or I guess let's
the
start with proactive. Let's start with proactive. So we were talking about, being able to kind of proactively see what's out there and reduce the attack surface.
Mhm.
So how does that start? Let's start there, and then we'll go to All right, you didn't reduce your attack surface enough. We got to respond to an incident. So when you think
I'll
about reducing
yeah.
sorry, when you think about reducing an attack surface, what's the low-hanging fruit there that most customers could really benefit from?
So one of the I'll explain a bit our way of thinking, right? On the detection and response part, regardless if it's EDR or XDR, one of the key things that we've done is we automatically correlate everything and present them into a human readable format. Now, at the same time, going back to the problem that organizations are facing, that they don't have time and they don't have the resources to look at all of this data, we were thinking, okay, but if I am looking at an incident, and in that incident, I understand the entire context, but can I prevent this incident from actually happening?
Mhm.
So that got us to develop what we call proactive hardening and attack surface reduction, or phaser for short. Now you can see I'm a Star Trek geek. That's
I'm Star
the
Wars
name of it.
personally,
Uh, uh,
so we won't
okay,
argue, but
we will not argue on this, but the
I'll see
naming
you at
for
DEF
this,
CON.
true. Um, with Phaser, we wanted to enable security hardening to be individualized, and I'll explain a bit. Uh, if I am able to understand that there are multiple things on my machine that are not used and can be used in a bad way from by the attacker, uh, maybe I can just reduce that particular attack surface, block those tools, or allow them to run only in the way that I am actually using them, and be able to say, okay, now my environment is hard. Now, how did we do this? We took the following approach. We said, okay, everybody in the company behaves in a certain way, regardless if you are in HR, legal, finance, IT, security, whatever. You have your own behavior and you behave in a certain way on a device. So for example, if I'm on my MacBook, I behave in a certain way. If I am on a Windows server, I behave in a different way. Why? Because I am doing various things that are relevant to that particular profile, that pairing of user and device. Now, we had this crazy thought a few years ago. What if we could provide individualized security or customized security for everyone? So imagine this, 8 billion people in the world, 8 billion different policies. Clearly
Yeah.
a nightmare to manage, right?
Yeah, my
But,
GRC nerve just on
but at the same time, almost impossible for an attacker to move
Right.
laterally. So,
Yeah.
because again,
Because they're
every,
lazy. I think that's the thing that people don't understand about attackers is they're really lazy because it's a volume game, right? And so
absolutely.
if they come into an enterprise where they can't find one identity technique that works for a
Mhm.
bunch of accounts, they're just going to go find a different enterprise, right? They're not going to stay there for hours trying to brute force their way in.
Absolutely. And if they are there and let's say they compromised my machine and they are trying to use the exact same techniques, just like you mentioned, I wouldn't call it lazy, I'll just call it automation because that's what the industry likes to call it. But the
I like to make them look as bad as possible.
okay. Uh, the the reality is that if they try to use the exact same recipe on a different one, different individual on a different machine, and that machine has a completely different security setup, has a
Mhm.
completely different set of hardening rules in place, it will not work, right? And what's our goal as defenders? To reduce the possibility of having an attack, right?
Yeah.
As quickly as possible. Just like you mentioned, they are there to make money. If it takes long to breach that enterprise, I'll just go and find another one which is super easy to breach, and I'll get my money out of there, right?
All right. So
So
from our already skeptical audience, How do you have 800 different policies without introducing a significant amount of overhead?
So this is where we had to actually innovate a lot. And because we wanted to get a better understanding of how a certain user behaves on that device. And then Phaser starts to learn all of that behavior.
Mhm.
And then it starts to emit some actionable recommendations. These actionable recommendations you can apply them either in an automatic fashion, allow Phaser to do all the work, or if you just want to take direct control, you can also take direct control of those as well. Now, we focus on applications that are used by bad guys to do bad things.
Mhm.
I'll explain. We recently investigated, I think it was more than 700,000 incidents in the last 90 days across all of our customer base to get a better understanding of, for example, how living off the land tools are used.
Mhm.
The
Because the danger of
percentage,
somebody stealing your car is quite a bit higher than the danger of somebody stealing your Razor scooter, right? So,
exactly, exactly. And the percentage, 84% of those incidents involved using at least one living off the land
yep.
tool. So everybody has, I'll give the PowerShell example. Everybody has PowerShell enabled. Why? Well, even if you
Nobody
don't
knows
use it,
why.
exactly. Even if you don't use it, some IT user, automation user will run a whatever, quarterly, monthly report, etc. Now, with any security solution, you have the following. Allow PowerShell, do not allow PowerShell. Okay, if you do not allow PowerShell on that particular machine, okay, nobody can run PowerShell. That IT automation user will not work, etc. So you need to allow it to run. The reality is that if we start looking at the users, I'll take an example. On a Windows machine, you have your own user, you have a domain user, and then you have NT system. At least three different users, right? Super simple. We'll keep it simple as that. Now, Phaser is able to say, okay, Daniel, as a user, is not using PowerShell. Doesn't need to run PowerShell. We'll just remove PowerShell from capabilities from him. The second user, whatever, let's call it, okay, let's say Jackie is the second user. Jackie uses PowerShell. Now, Phaser understands Jackie is using PowerShell on the same machine in this way.
Hmm.
So only allow Jackie to run it in this particular way,
Yeah.
which is not the malicious one.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have NT system or whatever IT automation user that needs to run that has its own behavior.
Hmm.
So you are no longer limited to the fact that, hey, we are allowing everybody to run PowerShell on this endpoint. You have the ability to say, okay, for Daniel, do not allow because he doesn't need to. He never touches PowerShell. Jackie uses it only in this way. And this automation user needs to run it whatever, every month or every 90 days or whenever they need to run it. Do not allow it to run in any other way.
Yeah.
The purpose for us with Phaser was if somebody, or let's say if I get hacked, if I get compromised, the worst thing that the attacker can actually do on my machine is basically do my job because he cannot do anything else,
Yeah. Yeah. Because
right?
you've locked down all of the other kind of
Exactly.
little
Now,
wormholes between you and everything else.
everything that I mentioned here sounds like a management nightmare, right? How do I do that? How do I deploy this? How super simple. These were the three questions that we wanted to answer even before we started to draw the workflows within Gravity Zone and everything. So deployment, super simple. Same agent, just deploy it there. It's a setting, enable it. Once you enable it, it starts to learn. It starts to map the attack surface. It shows you what that particular, each of those profiles is doing. Now, here's another key step. what we are doing behind the scenes is we are clustering those profiles. Because again, if I am building 100 or 10,000 profiles, complete nightmare to manage, right?
Yeah.
But if I am able to group all of them in various clusters and say,
Hmm.
apply this set of recommendations,
Yeah.
automatically apply or take direct control, apply this set of recommendations for this particular cluster,
Yeah.
it's
It's kind of like
yes.
so I always think about it like a hospital, right? So like at the hospital you have different groups of people, and within those groups those people actually have very like different
Mhm,
specialties, right? So you have the
exactly.
orderlies who probably don't have access to the opioids, and then you have the nurses. Some of them have access to the opioids and some of them are nurse practitioners, so they can actually do a little bit of medical like
Yeah.
stuff, procedures, right? So I think that it's really important. And when I first got into security, I literally knew nothing about security. I came in as a data scientist. I'd spent 15 years in finance. And the first, you're basically talking about user and entity behavior analytics, but with action taken based on those analytics. And that was the first detection I wrote, was like, let's look at what people are using, when they're using it. Is this normal for them? And I actually wrote it based on financial fraud. And I think sometimes in security, people who grow up in security and
Mhm.
only ever know like syslog and sysmon, and like sometimes they lose sight of it's actually those behaviors, that building a very basic. And this is like, LLMs are not the answer for everything. You can literally just use regression models with user and entity behavior analytics. But yeah, because it's getting down to that baseline. Okay, so give me an example. And I think somebody actually asked this, so give me an example of a real world where this worked, right? Where like a user, where you were able to use these techniques and kind of the reduced privileging and things like that to stop an attack or limit the fallout of an attack, where normally it would have been more catastrophic.
So, for example, I have multiple examples of this working. We had a customer. I'm not sure how familiar you are with BitsAdmin. So, BitsAdmin is one of the most loved tools by the bad guys. Why? Because it exists on every Windows machine and it's nobody restricts it. And we had they were testing out Phaser on just a bunch of their infrastructure. And unfortunately, one of their users actually got compromised and on a machine that did not have phaser on it. And well, the attacker tried to move laterally using a couple of living of the land tools. Um, the bad thing that the attacker did is that he tried to move laterally onto one of the servers that was protected by phaser. And of course, the first of all, the actual lateral movement failed because uh, those were not tools that were regularly used on that server.
So you'd already removed them.
Yeah, we actually blocked the access to them. And not only that we are blocking that access, but when somebody tries to abuse them, we also create an incident.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people started to look into it and, okay, interesting. Where is this coming from? They started to investigate it and they figured out, hey, it didn't go through. Uh, and in reality, I think the attacker actually got bored. So, but the nicest and the best example that I have with Phaser overall is that we were um, in the early access phase for it, and we had one customer that came back to us to provide feedback, and he was like, across my entire executive team, we have 196 applications that exist on those machines, never got used, and I got Phaser to restrict them. It's been 2 months and nobody complained.
Well, and that's like, so this is one of my, we have so many babies in in our enterprises, because that's one of the, Every time I come into an enterprise, I start going through Google Drive or Box or whatever their file sharing system is, right? And I'm like, look at all of these files that are exposed to the public. And like, if I go through today and I yank access to every single one of these files, how long do you think it'll be until somebody actually needs one and has to reach out? And it's I think because for so long, security and IT were like these tiny little people in a closet, like the Miltons, from Office Space. And so we never wanted to make anybody mad. We never wanted to because, like they already didn't like us. And at this point, it's like we are literally the most important organization in an enterprise. We are the only thing keeping the enterprise from existential crisis due to the cost of an attack. And we need to start saying, hey, the 5 minutes it's going to take one of my engineers to restore access to PowerShell when for some reason my CTO really needs it, that's going to be a heck of a lot less than the 15 days it's going to take to respond to this eventual breach, which will happen. And there's such a mindset shift needed there of like, yes, a little bit of friction, a little bit of inconvenience is probably a good thing because maybe that'll help people understand the criticality of the resources that they're using. Because that's another thing I think is an issue. If all these resources are just wide open, how are people supposed to understand how vulnerable or not vulnerable they are if they're not security people? It's like if I walk into a bank and there's not even a badge reader on the vault, how am I supposed to know that that's something I shouldn't be letting everybody have access to? So I don't know. I'm a big believer of friction. I think we are the generation of instant gratification, and that has caused more problems than almost anything else. It's the same thing with spinning up AWS stuff or Azure stuff. It's like it's that easy. I want it done right away, but I don't stop and say like, "Hey, this container's got all of these dependencies and things that it probably really doesn't need." And if I even know that, right? So,
Mhm.
here's a cynical question for you. What happens if I already 18 months ago went to my budget committee and finally got budget and I have just sunk an insane amount of money into, whether it's XDR, EDR, what happens if I've already spent a lot of money there? Is that a place where how do I start to integrate Phaser in a cost-effective way if I've already sunk a ton of money into the existing tools that I have? Like, because I
Uh,
understand that at the end of it,
mhm.
like in the long run, this is probably actually going to return value if you're doing it correctly by, restricting resources and things like that. But how do I start to have that conversation if we already spent a bunch of money on tools that aren't necessarily returning what we thought they would for value?
I would be so my suggestion is to start by viewing proactive hardening as complementary, not a replacement. I mean, again, I'll emphasize on this. Detection and response are still essential, but they only kick in after something happens. Now,
Right.
with proactive hardening, the goal is to shrink the space in which the attackers can operate in the first place. And integration is typically low friction. As I mentioned, for example, Phaser runs alongside our EDR. It gets all kinds of data from EDR itself. It does some of the hardening based on that data. It also brings data to that EDR as well, just like I give the example with the incidents that. But the reality is that over time, this reduces noise for your detection tools. So you're not just adding security, you're improving return on investment of what you've already invested in.
Alert fatigue is the number one cause of tier one SOC analyst burnout. It's just like I got 9,000 VPC alerts.
Yeah.
One of them could be lateral movement, but the other
And
8,999 aren't. So I'm just going to dismiss them all.
the worst thing about that is that all of them are high.
Yeah.
I
Oh
had
yeah,
this
yeah.
conversation.
Critical alerts. Yep, yep. Critical alerts. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm hearing is if you already spent a bunch of money on a security system so you have ADT to respond to your house if somebody breaks in, the better thing to do is probably to start upgrading your doors and windows to make sure that they're locked if nobody uses them, and start identifying where those places are. And so like I think this is really important in that we I always go back to my first degree was psych. So I think we have to go back to if I'm a CEO or CFO and I'm trying to understand psychology of my security teams, even when teams make the right decision, if they're making it if they're making it reactively and they feel like they're making it because there's stuff coming at them, they feel bad about it and they're not as effective in their jobs. And so the thing that it really appeals to me about proactive hardening is that if you look at every verb in security, we want to believe we're proactive. It's not monitor or maintain, it's all detect, investigate, hunt, triage, respond. So we really want to believe that we're proactively protecting our organizations. And I think the cognitive dissonance of what we want to do, and then when we get into an enterprise, what's possible really causes that burnout and the fatigue and the just kind of defeated feeling that a lot of security people have. So beyond the actual protection that proactive hardening provides, I think it's also important to emphasize that without a tool to do these things, your security teams become more and more depressed and less effective because they feel like they're just battling fires while somebody keeps starting them. They don't feel like they're actually doing anything to prevent people from starting fires. And I could not emphasize more how good morale and a good working relationship on your security teams can be the make or break for your security teams, and how proactive tools really help that. So that's my little soapbox moment, because I have so many friends that they look like they're being held captive at their jobs. They look like kicked puppies. And a lot of it is this it's this, I have 10,000 critical alerts. Nobody understands. Nobody's doing anything differently. And I don't have the
Mhm.
tools I need to change the source of those alerts. I just have more tools to help me sort through them. So yes, big big
Yeah,
endorsement for Bitdefender's proactive hardening, because it really does help you feel like you're a little bit more in control.
thank you.
Yeah. All right. Last question. You are a thought leader. So where do you think we're going? So 5 years from now, one, what do you hope to be able to say about Bitdefender and what you've been able to do? And where do you think we're going to thumbs up? And where do you think we're going to stand do you think we'll be at fully individualized security policies in 5 years? Do you think that's where we're going?
So the fully individualized security policies, they are here and they are real right now
Well, I mean, you're
with
setting
Phaser.
the standard. Do you feel like
Yeah.
the industry will have adopted this? Do you hope the
Uh,
industry will have adopted the standard in 5 years?
yes, absolutely. And we are seeing a lot of interest in, and not only from customer prospects and industry analysts, but also from our competitors on this particular topic. Because the reality is that if you are able to reduce the attack surface as much as possible, then you can have a bit more control on what is happening within your organization. Now, 5 years from now, if we were having this conversation maybe 2, 3 years ago, I would say I've said, okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. But now with the AI and the agentic and all of the things that are happening, my prediction for 5 years might not be even true in the next 6 to 9 or 12 months, right? The um, the reality is that there is a lot of good things that are happening with all of these push for AI and agentic, but at the same time, there is a lot of concern across CISOs, even from our side, thinking on various ways on how we can actually protect organizations from risks that we might not even be aware of.
Yeah, well, I think proactive hardening becomes critical with AI agents, right? Because if they go off the
Absolutely.
rails and start doing things in PowerShell that you didn't intend them to do. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I spent last week at AWS Reinforced, so I spent a whole bunch of time talking about this, and yeah, I think it's going to become even more necessary to put only the permissions in place that a specific, and it may change over time, right? Because when you
Hmm.
think about the fact that we're moving from deterministic, like ones and zeros binary, to
Yeah.
probabilistic, where we have agents that are going to be making judgment calls, which are just statistical. Don't get me started on reasoning, but we
Yeah,
have to be able to monitor the resources they're accessing, really lock them down, and then you'll probably have some other agent that it requests access from that decides whether they should have it. But yeah, the ability to only give these agents access to the things they need to do their part of the workflow, is, I think, is going to be even more critical. All right.
absolutely.
Daniel, thank you so much. Is there anything else I missed? Where can people find more information about Bitdefender? Do you have any big events coming up that you're excited about? I know we have Hacker
So
Summer Camp is what we all look forward to.
I think the biggest event that we are going to attend is going to be Black Hat
Yay.
in August. But if anyone is interested in seeing how this individualized security can reduce your risk, again, without adding overhead, you can just come talk to us after the session, and we are more than happy to show you what this looks like in action. Also, it's super simple, bitdefender.com/phaser with a PH, and that's it. Super simple to get it up and running, get it started. I think you are really missing out on not testing it.
Yeah. And again, for small and mid-sized businesses, even if you think you should be managing your own security, you shouldn't. All right. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank
All
you.
right. For Security Weekly, I'm Jackie McGuire. I'd like to thank Bitdefender, our sponsor for this webcast. We'll see you next time.